It started as just another hilarious night on The Tonight Show, until Jimmy froze mid-laugh and realized Jennifer Lawrence wasn't joking anymore. Studio 6B was electric that Tuesday evening in New York. The familiar blue and gold lights bathed the iconic Tonight Show stage. As the Roots played their signature upbeat intro, 300 audience members packed the studio, their energy infectious as always. Jimmy Fallon, in his perfectly tailored navy suit, was doing what he did best, making America laugh before bedtime. Jennifer Lawrence sat across from him in the guest chair, radiant in an emerald green dress that caught the stage lights beautifully. She'd been promoting her latest film, and the interview had been going exactly as expected. Witty banter about her infamous red carpet falls, stories about accidentally breaking props on set, and that signature Jennifer Lawrence charm that had made her America's sweetheart. The audience was eating it up. Every punchline landed perfectly. Every self-deprecating joke earned thunderous applause. Jimmy was in his element, playing off Jennifer's natural comedic timing with the ease of someone who'd hosted thousands of these conversations. "So Jennifer," Jimmy said, settling back in his chair with that warm smile that had endeared him to millions, "I have to ask about your latest role. You're known for being this fearless performer who just throws herself into everything. What's your secret? How do you make it look so effortless?" It was the kind of softball question that usually led to a funny anecdote or humble deflection. The audience leaned forward expectantly, ready for another laugh. The cameras zoomed in slightly, framing both host and guest in that perfect Tonight Show composition. But something shifted in Jennifer's expression. The practiced smile faltered for just a moment. She looked down at her hands, then back up at Jimmy, and for the first time that evening, her laugh didn't reach her eyes. "You know, Jimmy," she said, her voice still light but carrying an undertone that made him pause. "Everyone always says that I make it look effortless, that I'm fearless, that I just have it all figured out." Jimmy's comedian instincts kicked in. He sensed a setup for another self-deprecating punchline. "Well, you do make it look pretty easy," he said with an encouraging grin. "I mean, you've got the Oscar, the blockbuster franchises, the critical acclaim. You're living the dream, right?" That's when it happened. Jennifer Lawrence, the woman who'd charmed the world with her authenticity and humor, who'd built a career on being relatable and down to earth, looked directly into Jimmy's eyes and said something that stopped the show cold. "Jimmy, can I tell you something? Something I've never said out loud before?" The audience quieted slightly, sensing a shift in energy. Jimmy's smile remained, but his eyes sharpened with genuine attention. In his years of hosting, he'd learned to recognize when a moment was about to become something more than entertainment. "Of course," he said, leaning forward slightly. "What's on your mind?" Jennifer took a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her chest. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more vulnerable than anyone in that studio had ever heard it. "I wake up every single morning terrified that I'm going to disappoint everyone." The words hung in the air like a confession. The audience fell completely silent. Even the Roots seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Jimmy's practiced smile slowly faded as he realized this wasn't heading toward a punchline. "I know everyone sees me as this confident, fearless person who just bounces back from everything," Jennifer continued, her voice beginning to shake slightly. "But the truth is, I'm paralyzed by the fear of not being perfect. Every day, every role, every interview, every red carpet appearance." She paused, looking out at the audience for a moment, before turning back to Jimmy. "Do you know what it's like to have millions of people think you're strong and confident when you spend every waking moment convinced you're about to mess it all up?" Jimmy felt the shift happening in real time. This wasn't the Tonight Show anymore. This was a human being in pain, sharing something raw and real in front of 300 strangers and millions of viewers. Every instinct told him to find a way to lighten the mood, to steer back towards safer territory. Instead, he made a choice that would define this moment forever. Jimmy Fallon set down his note cards and looked directly at Jennifer Lawrence, with an expression stripped of all performance, all entertainment value. This was just Jimmy, the person, talking to another person, who was hurt. Jen, he said softly, using her name instead of her full name for the first time that evening. How long have you been carrying this? The question broke something open in Jennifer. Her composure, so carefully maintained for years of public appearances, cracked completely. Tears began to form in her eyes, and she brought a hand to her face, as if trying to hold herself together. Since I was nominated for my first Oscar, she whispered. I was so young, and suddenly everyone was calling me brave and fearless, and this role model for young women. And I thought, if they only knew how scared I am all the time, if they only knew that I go home after these interviews and replay every word, convinced I said something wrong. The camera operators continued filming, but everyone in the studio understood they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't scripted television, this was raw human vulnerability happening in real time. I Google myself obsessively, Jennifer continued, the words pouring out now like water through a broken dam. I read every review, every comment, every tweet. I know I shouldn't, but I can't stop. Because what if someone finally figures out that I'm not as good as they think I am? What if I really am just fooling everyone? Jimmy felt his own eyes begin to water. In 20+ years of entertainment, he'd never seen anyone be this honest on television. The weight of what she was sharing, the courage it took to say these words out loud, hit him like a physical force. Jen, he said, his voice rougher now, you know that's not true, right? You know that the work speaks for itself. Jennifer shook her head, tears now flowing freely. That's just it, Jimmy. I don't know that. I look at my performances, and all I see are the mistakes. All I see are the moments where I could have been better, should have been better. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning humming. 300 people sat in complete silence, many with tears in their own eyes. This had transcended entertainment. This was humanity at its most vulnerable. Jimmy stood up slowly, not because he was directed to, not because it was part of the show format, but because something in him recognized that this moment called for more than words. He walked around his desk and, without asking, sat down on the edge of Jennifer's chair. Jen, he said, I need you to look at me for a second. She lifted her head, mascara slightly smudged, looking younger and more fragile than anyone had ever seen her. I've been in this business for over 20 years, Jimmy said, his voice steady and warm. I've met hundreds of actors, musicians, comedians, artists. And you know what I've learned? The people who are truly great, the ones who last, the ones who matter, they're all terrified. They all think they're not good enough. You know why? Jennifer shook her head slightly. Because caring that much, being that afraid of disappointing people, that's not a weakness. That's what makes you extraordinary. The fact that every performance matters to you that much, that you put that kind of pressure on yourself, that's exactly why you are as good as everyone says you are. He reached over to his desk and grabbed a tissue, handing it to her gently. And more than that, Jen. The fact that you just shared this right here, right now. Do you realize what you just did? You just showed every person watching this that it's okay to be scared. That being human and being successful aren't mutually exclusive. Jennifer took the tissue and wiped her eyes, looking at Jimmy with something like wonder. But what if I really am just fooling everyone? Jimmy's response came without hesitation. Then you'll still be the person who was brave enough to be honest about being scared. You'll still be the person who just showed millions of people that perfection isn't the goal. Connection is. He turned to address the audience directly, his voice carrying across the studio with quiet authority. You know what we just witnessed here? We witnessed courage. Real courage. Not the kind you see in movies, but the kind it takes to tell the truth about being human. The audience began to applaud. But it wasn't the usual energetic Tonight Show applause. It was deeper, more thoughtful. It was the sound of recognition, of people acknowledging something sacred. Jimmy turned back to Jennifer and made a gesture that would be talked about for years afterward. He took off his suit jacket, the same jacket he wore for every taping, his lucky jacket that had been with him through every triumph and failure of his career. "This jacket has been with me through panic attacks before shows," he said quietly, "through nights when I was convinced I wasn't funny enough, smart enough, good enough." He draped it gently around Jennifer's shoulders. "And right now, it's reminding you that you're not alone in feeling this way." Jennifer pulled the jacket closer around herself, and for the first time that evening, her smile reached her eyes. Not because she was performing, but because she felt genuinely seen and understood. "You know what's funny?" she said, her voice still thick with emotion, but stronger now. "I came here tonight to promote a movie, to be charming and funny and perfect. And instead, I just completely fell apart on national television." Jimmy grinned, and this time it was his real smile, not his TV smile. "And it was the most perfect thing you could have done." The episode aired exactly as it happened. The response was unlike anything in late-night television history. Social media exploded with people sharing their own stories of perfectionism and fear. "It's okay to be scared" became a trending topic for weeks. Mental health organizations praised the segment. Young women wrote letters, thanking Jennifer for showing them that success and fear could coexist. Parents used the clip to start conversations about the pressure to be perfect. Jimmy kept a photo from that night on his desk. Jennifer in his jacket, tears on her cheeks, but genuinely smiling. The jacket became legend among Tonight Show staff, professionally cleaned and framed with a note from Jennifer. "Thank you for showing me that being human on TV is better than being perfect." But the story doesn't end there, because what happened after the cameras stopped rolling revealed even more about who Jimmy Fallon really is. As the studio emptied and the crew began breaking down the set, Jimmy didn't head to his dressing room as usual. Instead, he stayed with Jennifer, sitting quietly in the now dimmed studio as she collected herself. The makeup team discreetly offered touch-ups, but Jennifer waved them away. For the first time in years, she didn't care how she looked on camera. "Jimmy," she said, still wearing his jacket like a protective shield, "I can't believe I just did that. My publicist is probably having a heart attack right now." Jimmy laughed softly. "Your publicist will survive. But you know what? You just did something that's going to help a lot of people who are struggling with the same thing." He was right. Within hours of the episode airing, Jimmy's social media was flooded with messages. Not the usual jokes and memes, but heartfelt stories from viewers sharing their own battles with perfectionism. Teachers wrote about the pressure they felt to never make mistakes in front of their students. Doctors talked about the weight of being seen as infallible. Parents confessed to struggling with the fear of not being good enough for their children. One message particularly moved Jimmy. It was from a teenage girl named Sarah who wrote, "I've been having panic attacks because I'm afraid I'll never be as perfect as everyone expects me to be. Watching Jennifer cry and seeing you be so kind to her made me realize I'm not broken. Thank you for showing me it's okay to not be okay." Jennifer, too, was overwhelmed by the response. Her Instagram post about the show, a simple photo of her wearing Jimmy's jacket with the caption "sometimes falling apart is the most honest thing you can do," became one of her most liked posts ever. But more importantly, it opened up conversations she'd never expected. Fellow actors reached out privately, sharing their own struggles with the pressure to appear perfect. Directors told her they appreciated her honesty because it reminded them to create safer spaces on set. Young fans wrote letters saying they felt less alone in their own perfectionist tendencies. 3 months later, Jennifer appeared on The Tonight Show again. This time, she brought something with her, Jimmy's jacket, professionally cleaned and pressed, but with something new. Sewn inside the lining was a small patch with words embroidered in gold thread. "Perfectly imperfect, JL and JF. I wanted to return this," she said, holding up the jacket during her interview. But I also wanted to add something to it, because this jacket now represents something bigger than just a kind gesture. It represents the permission to be human. Jimmy's eyes welled up as she explained that she'd been working with mental health advocates to create a foundation focused on perfectionism and anxiety in young people. "We're calling it the Perfectly Imperfect Project," she said, "and it all started with a jacket and a reminder that it's okay to fall apart sometimes." The audience erupted in applause, but this time Jennifer didn't flinch at the attention. She'd learned to receive love without feeling like she had to earn it through perfection. Jimmy put the jacket back on, the new patch invisible to cameras, but meaningful to both of them. "You know what I love about this?" he said. "6 months ago, you were afraid to show people you were scared. Now you're helping other people do the same thing." "That's what good friends do," Jennifer replied, and the word friends carried weight. They'd moved beyond the typical host-guest relationship into something real and lasting. The interview that night was different too. Jennifer was still funny, still charming, still engaging, but there was a depth to her presence that hadn't been there before. She spoke honestly about her therapy journey, about learning to catch herself when perfectionist thoughts crept in, about the daily practice of choosing authenticity over image management. "I still Google myself sometimes," she admitted with a laugh. "But now when I catch myself doing it, I close the laptop and call someone instead. Usually Jimmy, actually. He's become my unofficial perfectionism sponsor." Jimmy grinned. "It's true. She texts me at weird hours sometimes just to say I'm spiraling about a review. Talk me down. And you know what? That's what friends do. We show up for each other's messiness." As that second interview concluded, something beautiful had been created. Not just a moment of viral television, but an ongoing relationship that demonstrated how vulnerability can transform into strength, how honesty can build bridges, and how sometimes the most perfect thing you can do is admit you're not perfect at all. The jacket now hangs in Jimmy's office, a reminder of the night when late-night television became something more meaningful. And whenever young performers come on the show struggling with similar pressures, Jimmy sometimes tells them about Jennifer's courage and how one moment of honesty changed everything. It wasn't just late-night television. It was a reminder that vulnerability is the greatest strength of all, and that sometimes the most perfect performances happen when we stop performing altogether.